Welcome back to the show. Well, it's a big happening this weekend. Mandy Goodhandy, Canada's first trans woman stand-up comic, will also be the first trans woman to sing at the TD Toronto Jazz Festival. It's going to happen Friday night at Music Hotspot 120 Diner. And Mandy Goodhandy joins me now. Hi, Mandy. Thanks so much for doing this.
Hello, Barb. Thank you for having me on.
I'm going to guess that these are, at the very least, interesting times for people in the trans community.
It's getting that way, it seems. Yes, definitely.
So, for instance, you being the first trans woman to sing at the Toronto Jazz Festival, what makes this so important? What does this mean to you?
I think, my definition of what it means is the fact that any sort of recognition that we can get for trans people, whether it's trans men or trans women, the better all round, because it's showing people that we exist. It's showing people that we do things just like everybody else, and any exposure is good for all of us.
Can you tell me a little bit about your story? When did you transition?
Well, it's been 25 years for me. It was an enlightenment. I don't speak for all trans people, by the way, because we all have obviously different stories, but for me it was an enlightenment because I really was in denial for such a long time, trying to play the part of a man, because I didn't want to be different. And at that point, I really didn't know what trans was. A lot of people didn't know what trans was, so naturally, I wasn't thinking in those terms. I just know that when I was a child, I was naturally a little girl. That's how I always felt. It was just something that came natural to me. Everything about me was like a little girl, and of course, until you learn about genitalia and the difference between the two, you don't really think about it when you're a child. And of course, I had to learn very quickly before I started going to school that I better start acting like all the other boys or I'm going to be picked on.
Would you say that your parents knew but really encouraged you to keep that, to sort of rein that part in?
I think they certainly did it in their own way. My mother was very protective of me, of course, and but the way she would put it was, "Well, I knew you were always artistic," and so that's how she saw me. She knew I was different. She just as the same as me. I didn't know what the difference was, or there was just something. My father was a little more bullying about it, a little more demanding, a little more verbally abusive about it, and he was very strict on me not acting like a girl. And, when I look back now at all of that, it's his upbringing. That's the way he was. And I understand to a certain degree now why he dealt with it the way he did. He was trying to protect me. It was like, you better start acting like a boy now, or, something's going to happen to you.
I think things are changing slowly, but you're talking 25 years ago or more, because when you were really little, there was a lot of fear around that.
Oh, yes. There was enormous fear even just about the gay and queer situation, never mind being trans. And a lot of the times people who were gay back then or lesbian back then were able to blend in as much as possible and just keep their sexuality hidden. But this was not the same thing, because you can't keep something like this hidden because it's so natural to you. And especially when you're a child and it just comes out that way and there's nothing you can do about it.
Mandy Goodhandy is my guest, Canada's first trans woman stand-up comic. She's got a big appearance this weekend at the Toronto Jazz Festival. And, I hesitate, but I will ask you about the Caitlyn Jenner thing because, of course, that's, I don't know that everyone in the trans community is thrilled with all of the attention, because Caitlyn Jenner seemed to suddenly sort of admit that she was going to be transitioning, and all of a sudden she's the leading authority on the trans community. How do you and your friends sort of feel about that?
I think it's a mixed bag, Barb. It's to get back to what I said originally was, any attention that we exist is good. When it came to get Caitlin, I knew where this was going to go because I knew there was going to be a lot of sensationalism. I knew that she was planning on doing a reality show. I knew that she had experience in that already. It's a big build-up. And it's almost like I didn't like the fact that she took her transition and made that into a reality show. That kind of bothered me because it was like, tune in next week when I tell you what my girl's name is going to be, and then I will tell you if you can call me he or she. And even then, she was hiding that fact, and that really bothered me. And I'm sure, again, though I don't speak for other trans people, I'm sure it bothered a lot of trans people out there. The minute you are able to be free and live as a trans woman, you don't tell people to tune in next week.
It's interesting. What would you say, just from your own personal experience, what do you feel is the biggest misunderstanding people have about trans people, the trans community, or the whole experience?
I think the biggest problem is people are so focused on sexuality and genitalia that they miss the whole point of how we feel and why we feel the way we do. It's not a sexual preference. It's not anything to do with the genitalia we were born with. It's not how we feel mentally. And unfortunately, people get focused into that. And that's why people will still call someone like myself a guy or you, I didn't know you were a guy, I didn't know you were a man. And it's very offensive because that's how they're looking at it. It's like, oh, well, you were born with this genitalia, so you must be a man because that's what you were born. It's that simple. Because people get it into their heads that everyone has to be put into a category. If it's confusing for them and they don't understand it, they don't even want to know about it.
Again, it's fear, right?
Yeah, oh, definitely. It's lack of education and a lot of fear. And in some cases, I don't blame people that much, Barb, because they don't know a lot about trans people. We're fairly new, and they're trying to figure it out. It's no different than my whole family having to. And the way I always put it to people is, it's not just me transitioning. My whole family's transitioning.
Sure, that's a good point.
And it's very, very important that we are patient with people as well.
If people want to genuinely learn more about this, understand more about this, how can people educate themselves?
Well, I think a start would be doing a little bit of reading, a little bit of research on the internet, find out the different stories that are going on, the way that trans people feel. Even if it's a situation where you feel maybe you have a child who may be trans and you're not really sure, or you have a neighbor, or you have somebody you really would like to approach, talk to. You can call groups. You can call the 519. You can talk to people who are trans or people who will talk to you about being trans and how they feel about it. It's out there. The problem is it's not going as mainstream as quickly as it should. More education in schools would help. Have a trans woman or a trans man come in and speak. And I'm talking about to younger children, even though people are really afraid of that. But that's when they start learning the most, and that's when they're the most accepting.
I'm almost out of time, but can you just tell me, at what age do you remember knowing that you identified as a girl?
Well, I can remember as far back as I can actually remember as a child, and I don't remember much before the age of 4. So I'm going to say around 4 or 5, and it was definitely a couple of years before I started school.
Mandy, this has been so interesting. Thank you. And so exciting about your appearance on Friday night. Good luck with that.
Oh, thank you so much, Barb. And I hope lots of people come out. Maybe you can get a chance to come by 120 Diner just south of Richmond on 120 Church Street, of course. And